Well, hello everyone. I seem to be having an issue with Facebook at the moment. I clicked go live and then it immediately stopped going live. So I'm not sure what's going on. Just checking right now. It does look like I'm streaming. What's really weird is it's not giving me the option to look at chat or anything anymore, so... Wow, we're in a weird state. Just doing a sample chat here. All right, I'm seeing chat. And I'm hearing it, obviously. All right. Well, hey, for those of you who are joining me early, this is going out on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, even Twitch, which probably won't be happening forever. I'm imagining I'll probably stop doing the Twitch thing here. But it definitely appears that I'm successfully streaming on Facebook, but Facebook is not letting me. Huh. That is very weird. So I don't know what's going on with that. I'm hoping we're good. I mean, I'm seeing that it's all still going. It's all still streaming. Let's go ahead and check the other areas. Let's go ahead and look on Twitter. I hope all of you are ready for today. I think today is going to be particularly interesting, primarily because the month that we're covering is April. And April, typically in Santa Clara County, the South Valley, is the peak month for real estate, and we have some very interesting numbers. If this is the peak, if April is the peak, I think we have some very interesting expectations we need to adjust for what's going to happen for the rest of this year. So Twitter seems to be up and going, so good news there. Let's see here. It looks like I am also up on LinkedIn, which is awesome. Let's go ahead and look at YouTube. And given the way that I do things now, it should be, let me see, yep, it shows us live right now. Outstanding. Okay, and plus, because of the way I do things now, Sold by Robert should also be streaming it, or at least giving you a link to go to where you need to go. Let's see if that's happening. So it's there. I mean, the image is there. You'd have to click on it to make it start, but yeah, look at that. Excellent. All right, we are off and running. So feel free to join in. You know, I'm always trying to evolve this experience so that everyone gets the most out of it. I think for us, the data we're going to be covering today is very interesting. If you have any questions or observations or topics you'd like to cover, feel free to reach out to me via the chat. Right now, you can reach me via, let's just make sure I get this correct. I believe the Facebook chat is working. I just tested it and it worked there. Also, I should be able to see any comments you make on LinkedIn, but I will not be able to reply directly to LinkedIn. So you can post something in LinkedIn, but you are not going to see my replies, apparently. However, if you're watching the stream, yeah, my replies should show up on the stream in the lower left-hand side of the screen. If you are doing the viewing via YouTube, I should see your comments there, and you should see my replies. So all good there. And then, of course, if you're watching on Facebook and using Facebook chatting, I should be able to see it there as well. So there you go. On Twitter, unfortunately, you need to join one of the other stream locations in order for it to work for you. So feel free to do that if you are so moved. We're going to get started here in about 8 minutes, where we're going to jump in as usual and cover the key data for the county and for San Jose and for Morgan Hill and for Gilroy, all of which is kind of amazing. We have some very interesting trends. One of the things I teased yesterday on Twitter was that in the month of April, we actually saw a decline in the number of homes sold, which is absolutely uncharacteristic. On a month-to-month change basis between March and April, in just about every previous market, we have seen that number increase, the number of homes sold. And we'll be looking at that going back 2 years on the data that we'll be looking at today. So that's a bit of a shocker, because we did see a bit of an increase in inventory, a bit of an increase in listings, but this completely uncharacteristic drop in number of homes sold. So we'll try to suss all of that out. We'll also take a look at what's been going on with months of inventory. As I mentioned, I don't know how many months ago I started including this, but in my market evaluations, I've started including months of inventory just because it's such a contradictory number. Meaning, if you were to just look at months of inventory, we should be having a crazy seller's market, right? Everything selling for above asking all the time because inventory is so low, right? When you have less than a handful of months of inventory on hand, that's supposed to be a seller's market. But then that is contradicted by all the other data, except for the amount over asking price. And we're going to get into that because another kind of semi-subtle, not discussed thing that is a reality. Let me also try to do, I'm going to do a test message here. Welcome to the stream. Feel free to ask your questions here. I'm not seeing it. That is disquieting. Interesting. Okay, so maybe that is not functioning. Let me go to another location here. Maybe this method of me doing it is just poor. Okay, that seems to be working. All right, everything's good. Everything's good. I tell you, there's just no... I can't wait till I can get all this blended together and not have to do tons of multiple windows for this stuff. Which is happening, which is a thing that's in the works. So hopefully that'll be part of the flow here soon. The service that I use has finally created a Facebook specific link where it'll actually integrate with the chat and whatnot. So hopefully that we'll get that going. But as I was saying, we've got 5 minutes left. Thank you to those who have joined. I see we've got a few folks on a couple of the different platforms here. Thanks for joining me early as we sort of have this ramp up to the official show. It's always good to see you. And I know there are so many of you that reach out to me after the show's over. So obviously a lot of you are consuming the replay version. But I've got tons of different news items we can talk about after we do the big numbers. Some local cool Morgan Hill stuff. we are reaching that time of the year where the Morgan Hill Freedom Fest is going to happen in July, and we just got news that that is, in fact, going to happen, which is good. So many recent news items have related to, various cool things that Morgan Hill does being canceled for security concerns, and I'm not real sure where that comes from. But we will go with it, I guess. I wouldn't mind having a conversation with someone in the know, in the city, who can discuss why that's a thing. I still don't understand why Facebook appears to be working, even though when I go to the dashboard, it tells me it's not. So all I can do is hope that I am, in fact, streaming to Facebook right now. Because I'll tell you, the producer page is telling me I'm not streaming, which appears to be incorrect. But I guess I got to take what I can get at the moment. So if you are on Facebook and you are not seeing it, please let me know. I'd appreciate it. I can't see anything. I can't see anything about the stats or what's happening. Wow. So weird. And even at the bottom, it says it's live. Yeah. Very bizarre. All right, folks, we're creeping up on it. I guess I can just close that now. I mean, I don't know how to go off. I guess I'll just have to stop streaming to it. I still don't understand what's going on. When I go to view the post, it shows it's still there. Facebook, you wacky platform. But anyway, so it still shows it as the correct name. It says recorded live, but it's still streaming. So I don't know what's going on there. I guess we'll just wing it. We've got a couple of more minutes till we jump in here. If you've got any questions you'd like to put in the queue now, we can absolutely do that. Just throw them in there and we'll see at what point during the show it makes the most sense to have a chat about it. In terms of, something else we can talk about is, and I was going to save this for the end of the show, is I have a new tool. So I have two tools, and it's a shame they can't be one tool. I have one tool that I have found is the best home value estimating tool. It tends to be more accurate than the other ones I have used. So I've got that. Then I have another tool that I would consider less of a get the value of my home tool and more a explore the options of all the various things I could do with the equity of my home, the current status of the market around my home. The part of that is amazing. So if you're interested in getting an absolutely free tool, one I would call the homeowner tool and one I would call the home value tool, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm still trying to figure out how to reach out to folks to give them access to this stuff. But this is a tool that I pay for that I am absolutely happy to let you folks use. Right now, there's a limit of 500 users. I've got about 100 currently signed up and using the new tool. I don't believe I have any limit on the home value tool, these are both things that would give you an update once a month. One is a super good estimate of your home value that really shows you the homes that are comparable to yours. And the other one really just focuses on your house, how much you owe, how much have you paid in interest, how much is left on your mortgage, all that kind of fun stuff. So absolutely happy to help set you up with that. Just go to soldbyrobert.com and reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to get you going with that tool. All right, here we go. We're just 5 seconds away from kicking it off. For those of you who are just joining me right now at 10 o'clock, welcome to Coffee and Real Estate Live Chat. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I am a licensed real estate broker in the state of California. And now nothing else is working. This is fantastic. It's not even letting me change my scenes here so that I can actually go from anywhere but where I am. So let's do things manually. Hello, everyone. It's the usual face you see on the third Saturday of the month. I've had a couple of weird things happen. I'm assuming that I am currently streaming to Facebook. Obviously, if I'm not, and I ask you to tell me if I am or not, all I'm going to get is nothing because you're not seeing anything on Facebook if that's true. But when I go to Facebook and I go to my page, it sure does look like I'm streaming. Let's see. Let me just make sure that that is true. Let's see. Go to my live page. And go to, sorry about that. I want to make sure this is working. It says I'm on and it says I'm live. There's a check mark next to live, and there I am. Okay, so it all seems to be working. I don't see any way I'll be able to turn it off because the back end system is just telling me that it's not streaming, that it's over. But the front end is showing that it's streaming. So this will be fun. We'll see how it goes. It may end up streaming forever. You may be seeing my office in the background for all eternity, as far as I know. Okay. So welcome to it, everybody. We're going to have a chat about what's going on in the wide, wonderful world of Santa Clara County real estate, particularly here in the South Valley where I'm based. As I was saying, my name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in California. Been in Santa Clara County pretty much my entire professional career. Got licensed in 1988, moved on and became a broker in the early 2000s, and I've been going strong ever since. If you have any goals you're trying to reach in real estate, you want to buy, sell, or invest, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com. And this is something we do once a month on the third Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. to review what's going on in our local markets. And this is a particularly big one. So if this is your very first month that you are partaking in coffee and real estate, first, make sure you've got your coffee. I normally roll my own, but today I had to do Starbucks because there was no milk in the house, so I usually make a mocha. So I had to go get the Starbucks mocha this morning. Why is this month more interesting than others? Because the data we're going to be talking about is the data from April of 2023, which tends to be the peak month in real estate. And you don't have to take my word for that. We'll go and we'll look at past performance, and we'll be able to see that April has, in fact, tended to be the peak for a whole bunch of different things over the past couple of years. And granted, the last couple of years have been weird because of COVID. But in terms of general trends, I suppose we could argue that you will frequently see things happen in May in terms of peaks and whatnot in some older market realities. But if we just go with the most recent data, April is supposed to be it. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. Let's go ahead and see if we can make that happen here. First, we're going to go ahead and look at the numbers. And let's jump in. So as always, we're going to look at the total homes on the market. So this is just whoa, that's not quite right, is it? This is just the inventory number. So this is how many homes were totally on the market. If you're a buyer, this represents, what was your choice? What was the choices you had? How many different homes did you have to choose from? And in the county overall, we saw a 20% decline from the same time last year. This year, we had 1,101 homes on the market in April, down from last year's 1,367. In San Jose, we had a 28% decline. There were 488 homes on the market and 681 last year. In Morgan Hill, we had a 9% decline, which, and something else to just understand about statistics in general, right? As soon as your sample size drops to a certain level, the margin of error gets much bigger, right? Because one value can throw a lot of other values off. And that becomes particularly true in, say, average sales price or average list price, those types of things, where if a error is committed in the entry of a list price, or one home is listed just crazily high because it should be, it's one of those rare homes that is super high end, that single number can throw the average way off, right? So those are things I tend to correct for when I'm doing these numbers, but just so you're aware of it, right? So as we get down to the things like this, where we only have a handful of homes like in a Morgan Hill, this is basically a wash. When you see a down 9%, this basically means it's about the same as last year, right? You see a negative 9% when you've got a sample size like Santa Clara County, where we're talking about thousands of homes. Then it's a little bit more of an indicator that something is actually a trend moving one direction or another. And then in Gilroy, down 2%, again, same case of just too small of a sample size. So I would call that a wash with last year as well. So very flat. San Jose and Santa Clara County in general, not so flat. And that's kind of interesting. And I think one of the things we learned from this is that the markets in Morgan Hill and Gilroy are tending to be a little bit more different, right? Those are desirable areas that are outside of the crush of Silicon Valley, right? I know that's one reason I live here. I live in Morgan Hill because it's not San Jose. It's not South San Jose. It's not Blossom Valley. It's not Almaden. Well, even Almaden is pretty good in terms of a little more elbow room. But you just don't feel that crush, right, of everything right on top of everything else. So I think that's one of the reasons why Morgan Hill and Gilroy tend to get so much love in the marketplace. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next number here. This is new listings or homes that were listed in the month of April. And we are going to be looking at, let's go ahead and I don't want you guys to be looking at my face instead of the important numbers. So let's go ahead and move my face somewhere else. There we go. All right. So these are sellers who decided to put their homes on the market in April, and we can see a pretty substantial decline from the same time last year. Down 33% overall in Santa Clara County, where last year we had 1,921 homes on the market or added to the market. This year we've got 1,297, so a substantial drop. And a lot of that is sellers, we've talked about different things that influence this number in the past. In the COVID era, it was, I just don't want random people walking through my house and leaving COVID germs all over the place. Today, the conversations I have really lean more into, why would I want to get rid of this 2.5% loan, this 3% loan that I have, when if I was to go buy somewhere else or make that move I plan on making eventually now, I'd be paying 7% interest rates on a loan. So a lot of that plays into it. I have seller clients right now, or prospective seller clients, who are in that exact position. They're keeping an eye on what's happening with the value of their home, but they're absolutely not hot to make that move now, and even less so with the news we got today about the increase in mortgage rates. In San Jose, that number's down 36%. 993 homes were listed in this month last year in San Jose, 636 this year. Morgan Hill, 92 last year, 48 this year, for a 48% decline, so an even bigger decline in Morgan Hill. And Morgan Hill is just one of those areas where I'm seeing a lot more people who are saying, I'm just going to stay. I'm not going anywhere. And if they are going somewhere, it's not in California. The plan is to go elsewhere, whether it's Idaho or Texas or Florida or Arizona. The most common conversations I have with folks entertaining the idea of selling their home in Morgan Hill, who are more serious about it, are folks who are leaving the state with the idea that I could sell my house here and then buy outright the house in these other locations. So for them, the interest rate doesn't come into it, right? It's less of an interest rate argument. In Gilroy, 80 homes last year, 55 this year, for a 31% drop, which is actually the lowest of the areas that we've got here on this particular page in terms of decline. So we're definitely seeing almost, it's not a wash. The difference between last year and this year is enough that it's not a complete wash in terms of being worried about the statistical reliability. So definitely we're seeing a bit of an uptick just compared to the other communities in April in terms of sellers wishing to kind of jump into the marketplace. All right. Next, let's take a look at total number of homes sold. Now, this is a super interesting one, and it gets more interesting once we look at not year over year change, but month over month change. We're gonna those charts are coming up here in a minute, because this completely bucks the trend. This is one of the numbers I teased yesterday on Twitter, and it's a mind blower. So let's just get into it. Last year, 1,618 homes sold in Santa Clara County. This year, 824. So a 50% drop, 49% drop. San Jose, 844 homes sold last year, 449 this year, for a 47% drop. Last year in Morgan Hill, 73 homes sold. This year, 19. That's a 74% drop. And in Gilroy, 63 last year, 25 this year, for a 60% drop. A complete crash over year. But what you're going to find amazing is, not only is it a year-over-year crash, which you can argue with a lot of different elements to it, it would make sense just given a general activity kind of take on it. But comparing it month to month, it's staggering. So we'll take a look at that one in an upcoming slide here. All right. Next on the hit parade, I believe we're doing months of inventory. This is a stat I added to the review, I think a month or two ago. What makes this one interesting is this is a number that suggests a very strong seller's market that just isn't there. Now, in this case, we've seen an increase in months of inventory means moving towards a stronger buyer's market in this case. Just to calibrate you to months of inventory, right? The idea of months of inventory is if we froze the number of homes we sold in April and we froze the inventory, and then moving forward, we assumed we would sell the same number of homes every month without adding homes to the inventory, how long would it take to sell off that inventory with the homes sold number for April? And this is it. It's a 63% increase from the same time last year. Last year, it was less than a month. It was 0.8 months of inventory, which is kind of nuts. I mean, so it's a little more than 3 weeks worth of inventory. Now it's 1.3 months. San Jose, 0.8 last year, 1.1 this year. That's a 38% increase. It was a 63% increase in Santa Clara County. In Morgan Hill, again, same number, 0.8 months, so less than a month. Now 2.8 months for a 250% increase. Gilroy, 1 month last year, 2.4 months this year. That's a 140% increase from the same time last year. So again, to give you an idea of how that stacks up, nationally, most folks will tell you that a balanced market is 5 to 7 months of inventory. I would argue that that's maybe a little different for our local market. I would argue 4.5 to 5.5 months. No matter which number you choose to use, whether you're assuming that I'm right or that sort of the industry standard nationally is right, we're way below that. And way below months of inventory, way lower months of inventory is supposed to equal a stronger seller's market. What it's really just telling us is we have super low inventory right now that is uncharacteristic for the kind of market we find ourselves in right now. But again, let's keep in mind, April is supposed to be the peak. So if we have hit the peak of sales and activity, we would expect months of inventory to increase from here, right? Next, let's take a look at this is pending contingent. So pending contingent, these are the number of homes that have gone into contract in the month of April. So not sold, but a seller has accepted a buyer's offer, and in the MLS, it changed from an active listing to pending or contingent. And this is a way to anticipate what we might see next month. And when we look at this on the graph version that just looks back over our shoulder on past months, it'll be a little bit more easy to see where we're at. So right now in Santa Clara County, we're down 28%. Last year, we had 1,414 homes go pending. This year in April, we had 1,021. In San Jose, that number's down a little bit more, down 32%. It was 745 homes last year, 509 homes this year. In Morgan Hill, 61 homes went pending last year, 43 homes this year for a 30% decline. And really, in terms of just overall activity comparing, Gilroy and Morgan Hill are kind of in the same boat here. 54 homes went pending last year, 39 homes this year in Gilroy for a 28% decline. This number is going to be the average original list price. And let me explain what I mean by original list price. This is the list price that was put into the MLS when the home was first listed. So this is a way to look into the seller's mind and figure out what were they calibrated to? What were they thinking they should get for this home? What number did they agree with the listing agent to put on the MLS when they first listed the home? And you can see that almost entirely across the board, these numbers increased with the exception of San Jose. So broadly, expectations across the county increased by almost 10%. Last year, the average original list price was $1,774,000. This year, it's $1,943,000. That's a 9.5% increase from last year. So seller expectations in the county overall were almost 10% higher than last year. Now, keep that number in mind as we move forward. because understanding these numbers relating to expectations, I think, is kind of important, because it's understanding the mindset of sellers and trying to understand where they're coming from. In San Jose, we see that it was a 3.3% drop from the same time last year, which is interesting. The average original list price was $1,440,000 in San Jose. This year it was $1,392,000. Very uncharacteristic. San Jose has been one of those cities where the average original list price has tended to be much higher. This can also simply indicate that we're seeing a lot more homes being listed that are at a lower price point. We're not seeing as many luxury listings. We are kind of in that time where folks who own luxury properties are not seeing this as the optimal time to list their home if they want to list at all, simply because that's where we've seen some of the biggest softening in the market has been at that luxury level. Next, in Morgan Hill, expectations look like they're up about 3.9% from the same time last year. Last year, $1,469,000 was the average original list. This year, $1,527,000. In Gilroy, down 2.9%. $1,208,000 last year, $1,224,000. So excuse me, not down, but up 2.9%, so almost 3%. Apologies, I've got the wrong marker there. It shouldn't be a negative, it should be a positive. So overall in Gilroy, sellers are expecting to get a little bit more, about 3% more. Now, Gilroy, interestingly, has been one of the most calibrated markets that we've seen over the last year in terms of reasonably pricing their homes at the get-go when they get first listed. We've seen a couple of variations, a couple of months that have been a little off from that, typically because homes at the higher end were listed in Gilroy, maybe one month or another. But typically, Gilroy has been a little bit better calibrated to the realities of the new market. Next, let's take a look at average sales price. Now, remember, we're trying to calibrate the difference between what folks want to get, what sellers think they should be getting, and what they are actually getting. And you can see that across the board, if we look at year-over-year numbers, everybody's getting less than the average sales price from last year. So while we can say that original list price was up 9.5% in Santa Clara County overall, actual average sales prices were down 6.1%. Last year, the average sales price, which is kind of staggering when you think about it in Santa Clara County, was $1,894,000. This year it was $1,778,000, which is still a very high amount, but definitely a down trend from the same time last year. San Jose, last year $1,574,000. This year $1,414,000, so down 10.2%. Morgan Hill saw the biggest decline in average sales price. Last year it was $1,680,000. This year $1,370,000, which is really just an emphasis of the shift in activity rather than so much a shift in the actual value of an individual home, right? Which makes sense. As interest rates go up, buyers are potentially looking to shave off cost relating to that month to month, and they can't change their interest rate, so they change how much they're buying in terms of total cost. Finally, Gilroy, $1,248,000 last year, $1,231,000 this year, for the smallest decrease in average sales price of 1.4% from the same time last year. As we look a little bit more deeply into this and check out percent of asking price, this is some interesting stuff too. Considering all the other things we've seen, it's interesting to note that in every case, we are seeing homes selling for over asking price. I think there's a couple of things you can say about this that make this an interesting market trend. Let's go ahead and cover what the numbers are first. So first, in Santa Clara County overall, last year, 114.4%, which means that on average, homes were selling for 14.4% over asking price. This year, 104.2%, so selling on average for 4.2% over asking price. That's a net 10.2% shift from last year to this year. San Jose, 114.8%, so even higher than the county average. This year, 104.5% for a 10.3% delta between last year and this year. Morgan Hill, an 8.4% change overall, with 111.3% being what we were getting last year and 102.9% being what we get this year in April of 2023. And in Gilroy, it's a 7.1% net drop, where we were seeing 108.2% of list price in April of 2022, and this year we're seeing 101.1%. So just over list price by 1.1%. So what does this tell us? When we take a look at what's happening with inventory, what it's telling us is homes are selling for over asking price, but it really is a segmented reality. It is not tending to be across the board. What we found is that a lot of freshly listed homes that were sort of the best homes in their market areas were really selling fast, right? There are some homes that in all of these areas are still on the market after being on the market for 9 months, 6 months, whatever that time might be. But those homes that came on the market that were the best of that bracket, whether it was relating to location or amenities or whatever else, the best examples in each submarket are going really fast and for multiple offers. So that's tends to be the trend that we're seeing here. But also keep in mind, this is April. Remember, April is supposed to be the big month. It is supposed to be the peak. So what we can expect is that from here, this number drops. And we're going to look at a chart here in a minute that sort of lays that out a little bit more clearly for you. But let's cover a couple of other points here. So first, days on market. Days on market are still way up. In Santa Clara County, it's 19 days. It was 10 days last year. And that's actually down. For a while, Santa Clara County had been up hovering around 30 days. But again, remember, this is the peak. We are at the top. And so from here on, we can expect days on market to most likely increase. It was a 90% increase in the same time last year. San Jose, 9 days last year, 19 days this year for 111% increase. In Morgan Hill, 233% increase. 9 days last year, 30 days this year. So still at a month. And remember, this is supposed to be it. I know I keep saying that, but that's the takeaway from today's show. If anything, is this is reporting on what the peak numbers of our market for 2023 should be. So we should look to these numbers just getting higher as we move forward. In Gilroy, same number, 9 last year, and 29 in terms of days on market for a 222% increase. Now let's take a look at looking back over our shoulder. We're done comparing year over year to a certain extent. But now let's look at, and this is one of the big charts here. So we'll hit each one of these. The first one is total active listings. And I want to draw your attention to this because you can see that between March and April, we had a little bit of an increase in 2023. So let's go to March and April of last year. Not as dramatic an increase, but an increase, right? We saw between March and April of last year an increase in total active listings, okay? And last year it was huge. This year it was not as huge, but still, it's which direction did it go? Was it a positive, negative, or negative number? That's really what we're looking at. If we look at March to April of 2021, once again, an increase. Much more on par with what we saw this year in terms of the amount of increase. Not just in terms of the month-to-month relationship, right? Obviously, this number is higher in terms of total active listings, but the shift from month to month is what we're focusing on. All right, next, let's take a look at new listings. Relatively flat between March and April, so not a huge increase. If we look at March and April of last year, look at that decrease. There was actually a decrease last year, and that makes sense. Remember what happened last year that was funky. We had interest rates take a hit. So if anything was going to negatively impact the idea of sellers coming onto the market, that's one of those things that would do that, right? If we look at the March-April shift the year before, look at that, up. So typically in March-April, you see an increase in the total number of new listings. You tend to see more folks listing. Really flat this year, big drop last year. But again, I'm not using last year's as a this is the way it should be year because that was right after interest rates took a dump. So just keep that in mind. Next is homes sold. So this stands independent of whether or not something got listed or whether or not what the inventory might be. This is just people coming out and buying a house. And look how much of a drop we saw. We saw this trend from January just going right up and up and up until March. I think last month when we talked about this, I estimated that we would see relatively flat performance in April. And we actually got negative performance. Number of homes sold actually dropped between March and April. Now let's look at March and April of last year. increase in home sales between March and April of last year. Oops, I clicked and it brought us the next chart. Let's look at March and April. Whoops, what did I just do? I need to not hit buttons. All right. We are at home sold again. All right, so let's look at March and April. I should have just left it alone. Look at that. If we do March, April last year, an increase. So, and that makes sense too. Remember, home sales are a delayed representation of when the offer was accepted. So if you're looking at the flow of a transaction, right? So someone makes an offer on a house, and in February or March, someone made an offer on a house that was accepted. They locked in their interest rate, which would have been a better rate. And then it closed 30 to 45 days later, which means it closed in April. So we wouldn't expect to see in April of last year some big drop in home sales, right? Because it would reflect interest rates that have been locked in 30 to 45 days earlier. So, and that is what we see. Nothing there that doesn't make sense. If we look at March, April of the year before, look at that. Huge jump in home sales in 2021. And again, look at the peak. That is virtually the peak. We got another peak in June, which frequently happens. If we look at June of last year, we saw a huge drop. But again, I'm not going to use last year as this is what we should be thinking about, or this is what we should expect as a standard, because last year was weird. Once March came, we had a big hit on what was happening. So if we look at this and we understand where we're at, our best expectation would be that from April, things stay flat until June and then decline. Because, I mean, look at this. If we look at 2021, June is the peak and it just drops right until we hit January. That's what tends to happen. New listings drop off as we head into winter. Total active listings tends to drop. So we are theoretically at the peak. So I don't see a lot of good news. If we continue to see this stay flat, that would actually be good news. If we see it continue to go down from here, that would be crazy news. If we see that, if we want to take a look at new listings and try to anticipate where they are going to go from April, let's look at April of 2021. And we can see that they tend to sort of stay going until June, and that's normal. Folks tend to focus on listing their home in time for children changing schools, for summertime to come, but then it tends to drop off once we get past June and enter into July. And you can see that reflected here. Again, we're at the peak. So this all spells a very interesting scenario where, and particularly since we're heading into more challenging economic times, where some folks may find they need to sell their home. It may not become a choice for a lot of folks moving forward. Some areas will obviously get hit more dramatically than others, but this is something to keep an eye on. This trend is a shocker to this market in terms of the decline in total number of homes sold. Next is pending. Now, what's interesting is that while we did see a decline in homes sold, we did see an uptick in homes pending. So my expectation would be that from where we stand right now in April, and if we look at pending, let's take a look at pendings in past March, Aprils. If we look at it, we saw a decline last year in March, Aprils, in the March, April time frame. Again, not going to take that as normal because of interest rates, but interest rates are still crazy now. But take a look at where March is. March was the peak last year in terms of pending, in terms of contracts accepted, which then fed this little bump in total homes sold the following month, right? So that's how those two relate to each other. Pending sales should be giving us a leading indicator of what we should see for homes sold in the following month. If we look at March, April here, we can see it was very flat. So this is quote unquote a more normal trend. The levels were a little crazier. The market was nuts, right? But in terms of trend, that's actually pretty normal. March, April, May, June, going all the way to June is typically when we see these homes going into pending, and then we tend to see a drop off. So it wouldn't surprise me if from here we see flat performance or maybe even a little more, but maybe not yet. I don't see enough economic stressors on our local marketplace to indicate that folks are going to be pushed into a scenario where they really have to sell to pull the profit out of their homes. But that's an interesting thing to note. These numbers are some of the most shocking that I think I've seen for our local market in a very long time. And that home sold number, I think, sets the stage for a very disappointing rest of 2023 in terms of what we're hoping for in terms of real estate performance. Now, obviously, that's a little bit more of a seller biased view, but we'll have to see how all this plays out. There are still an awful lot of folks out there who don't have to sell their home. If that changes and more folks have to come on the market because they do need to, and that raises inventory further, increases the competition without increasing the buyers, it's going to push down prices. But my feeling is prices are going to continue to go down. No matter what spectrum that I've defined here is coming in the next few months, I think it still ends up equaling lower prices. Because remember what's interesting here. We still had lower prices compared to the same time last year, even though homes were selling for over asking price in April, which I think is a fading trend. I don't think we're going to see homes continuing to sell over asking price on average in all the areas that we serve here as we move forward. Next, Santa Clara County list versus sales price. We can see that list price and sales price over the last month both increased. Average sales price, not a whole lot. List price expectation, and some of these higher blips here represent homes or errors that are super at the high end, right? And that can mean when a listing agent entered it into the MLS, because this is original list price, the first price that was entered into the MLS, if a real estate agent added an extra 9 or a 0 to that list price, that is sometimes reflected here. Did have an interesting influx of higher end homes that got listed in February. But if you were going to list a higher end home, a more luxury home, February would be the month to do it, February or March. So that wasn't horribly unusual. But from here on out, as we move into the summer months, this is an interesting trend to keep an eye on. If we look at what we had between March and April of last year, we can see we had a gentle increase in list price and a relatively flat sales price. We had a little bit more of an increase in sales price this year. Last year in 21, March, April, we saw relatively mild increases in both numbers. So very, very much on par, right? Clearly, average list prices are still way above compared to last year's where we're getting in terms of sales prices. And that's going to reflect also on what's going to have to happen with existing inventory and reducing prices. Overall, Santa Clara County percent of asking price. This is a look back over our shoulders, and you can see that March last year was the peak. March, April, right? 115.3 and 114.5, and we've been in a steady decline ever since then. And we hit 99% in January, and then we've been increasing for the last 3 months. And I think what we'll find is just like last year, where March, April were the peak, March, April will end up having been the peak this year for a percent above asking price. Given the number of homes sold drop and the lackluster number of homes that went pending in April, we may see something on par with 104.2 in May, but I honestly don't think it'll be much. It'll either be about the same number or a little less, and then after that, it wouldn't surprise me if we're back below 100% of asking price. Next, days on market. Really big drop, really since January. Since the year started, we've seen the number of days it takes to get a home sold decrease. And that's been a pretty dramatic trend. If we look at March, April last year, declined, but not nearly as much as it did this year. If we look at the year before that, dramatic decline in days on market. So more on par with what we saw in 2023, reflected in 2021. Where does it tend to go from here? Usually once you hit April, it tends to go up a little bit in both cases last year. So days on market should increase. Given the realities that we face, I think we see a much more 2022 increase in days on market than a 2021 increase in days on market. So where we peaked out at 36 days or 35 days in Santa Clara County in January of 2023, it wouldn't surprise me if given where we are, right? See, this is still among some of the highest numbers going all the way back to March of 2021. Wouldn't surprise me if we see this number pivot and go flat and then start going up and then going above 30 days within just a few months of now. So definitely a pivot point. I've talked about pivot points in the market before. April is one of those pivot points. Next, let's take a look at price reductions. This is the percentage of homes on the market that have had a price reduction. And these numbers make complete sense. In the month of April, we've had higher than list price offers, so selling for above asking price on average. We've had a peak of buyers, and we see that in the pending numbers. So the number of properties that are potentially looking to reduce their price gets limited, right? Last month in Santa Clara County, that number was at 22.6%, meaning 22.6% of all the homes currently listed in the county had a price reduction. This month, it's 17.4%. San Jose, it was 24.4% last month, 17% this month. Morgan Hill, it was 23.1% last month, 10.3% this month, so a huge drop there. And then in Gilroy, a similar sized drop, 18.8% last month, 29.7% this month. And look at what Gilroy is doing. At 29.7%, so many people, because that number is so high, so many people that have been priced so high, and there have been quite a few homes in Gilroy, despite the fact the market on average was really more calibrated to what's going on. There were definitely some holdouts who had been trying to hold on to their list prices, and I think they see this as their opportunity to get sold for the best number they're going to get right now today. And that's why we're seeing such a big jump in the number of homes that have had their prices reduced. The sad news is that an awful lot of these homes, and particularly for homes that have been on the market for over 100 days, 150 days, some that have been on the market for over a year, if they had been properly priced any time earlier, they would have sold for more than they're going to sell for today. And there's no question on my mind that that's true, which is a shame. Okay. So that takes care of the big numbers. If anybody's got any questions about that, I would be happy to try and answer them for you. I think these are ridiculously interesting market numbers that lay a path forward for us that is going to be disappointing. We are not going to see some continuing dramatic increase in the numbers people seem to want to see increasing. There are so many headlines out there that talk about how, oh, wow, the housing downturn is over. Yay for the housing market. I think we're still going to see another increase in the prime rate. Perhaps not as big as the last one, but I don't think they can do anything but increase that, which again, isn't always a direct reflection of what's going to happen with mortgages. Remember, that's more linked to the 10-year Treasury, which has actually been going up. So that indicates, and that's been reflected in what we've seen, right? We can look it up at some point here. Let's see. We can take a look at this if you like, if you want to see what interest rates are. I know that I usually do this, so actually I can pull this up now so it'll be ready when we go. And check out mortgage rates. But let's go ahead and get into some local stuff. Again, for those of you who have a question that you would like to ask or a market you're interested in talking about, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, we can go ahead and get into just some of the interesting data that's floating around out there. We can talk about some news items I think are interesting. One of the first ones I came across, particularly for us local Morgan Hill folks, and this is one I think is super critical for whether you're a parent or whether you are a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, whatever you are, one of the things that is so dramatically missing from helping young people is financial literacy. And I wanted to mention this one because I'm actually thinking about reaching out to these folks and finding out how I can help them do more of this. But this is the Boys and Girls Clubs of Silicon Valley, and they're doing something called the Future Grads Program. And the program is going to serve students right here in Morgan Hill. I hope that there are chapters of this everywhere. I hope there's a Gilroy chapter and a San Jose chapter everywhere because this is so profoundly needed. It amazes me that we don't teach this as required right up there with reading, writing, and arithmetic. Financial literacy should absolutely be part of that. And frankly, I think it should start in middle school. But this is a program for future grads, quote, realizes a student's dream by building a college-going mindset and defining the youth's journey to higher education, says a press release from BGCSV. The program equips students and families with the socioeconomic skills, college knowledge, and academic support from 10th grade through college graduation. So I think that's awesome. And I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention because if you've got a young person in your family or extended family that lives anywhere in this area, this is a great thing. And if you've got local high schools or middle schools that have sort of a extracurricular or course that they can take that's going to focus on financial literacy, no skill will be more used after graduation. Finding the area under the curve, unless you become an engineer, probably not something you're ever going to use again after high school. How the methods of Play-Doh, while amazing and great brain food, not going to help you financially once you graduate, right? But every single one of us is going to get beat over the head with topics relating to financial literacy moving forward in our lives. Perhaps none more important than understanding what you need to do to responsibly take on the kind of debt that's required to purchase a home. And the reason why I'm so kind of passionate about this one is I've been doing this for over 30 years, so clearly I was doing this in the last downturn, and nothing broke my heart more than seeing people who had been part of the subprime lending push, which is still going on, and just weren't prepared educationally for understanding the debt, understanding how to manage it, understanding once they got it, what to do with it to keep it from being a huge burden. And a lot of these folks lost everything. And it is a heartbreaking thing to watch. And if these folks if they had been given education instead of a waiver for qualifying for a loan, they would have been much better off. So I'm a huge fan of this. If you've got someone in your family who needs this kind of information, who's a young person, I look into this. I think this is something worth doing. Next, this one I thought was interesting to look at, more to just mention it. This is, I've spent a bit of time on biggerpockets.com. This is a great place to sort of poke around. It's one of those places that's interesting because there's an awful lot of folks out there. It reminds me of Twitter in a lot of ways, where there's an awful lot of noise that's generated by people who talk like they're professionals or really experts at something that are not. The hosts they have here, absolutely. These are guys and gals going out there and actually doing what they're talking about. But a lot of the folks who participate in the forums are a little bit less so. There's often a lot of talk rather than not talk. But they're not wrong here. In this episode, this is one of their podcasts where they're going to dive into two housing markets, Tampa, Florida, and Dallas, Texas. And I've absolutely looked at these. I spent a little bit more time looking at Fort Worth, doing some analysis there. Fort Worth is a suburb. Dallas is a lot like Phoenix, right? If you get numbers for different cities in Texas and think, wow, all these cities are doing these great numbers, and you go and you look, you discover that most of them are suburbs of Dallas. I have only spent a very limited time in Dallas, and usually not comfortable time in Dallas with it being so hot, but there's an awful lot of good things going on there in terms of investment options. So if investing out of the state, or if you live in Texas, or if you live in California, investing out of the state in these areas is a great way to go. And one of the things I'm going to remind folks of whenever they're thinking about investing in a different state or even their own state is to understand how hostile that state is to you as a landlord. I happen to have an investment property in a very hostile state, and I am on the fence right now about what to do about that. There is the consideration of taking legal action and suing the county in Hawaii on the part of like a class action kind of thing. But it's ridiculous. So if you want lower stress, focusing not just on what the property offers, but the kinds of things that the state and county do to landlords is another thing to understand as a key thing to making a successful investment. So just something I wanted to mention there. But I'm also a big believer in sort of broadening your comfort zone and being willing to invest in other states where things are amazing. Because here's the reality. The average person who lives in Silicon Valley who wants to get into investing, who isn't already blessed or benefiting from a ton of cash sitting in the bank, can't buy anything here. I mean, you have to, for the average down payment, you need $150,000, $200,000 as a down payment, where in many states you could buy 2 or 3 homes for that same amount of money. meaning that the amount of money you'd have to put down is about the same amount you'd have to put down on a car. So there are opportunities out there for you to get an investment going that you can afford with a relative minimum of cash on hand. So just something to throw out there. All right, some other tidbits. This is new construction picks up in April. Multifamily construction hits historical high. And this is always one that annoys me because they never give me the information I need. I don't just need to know that it's multifamily. I need to know what kind of multifamily. Are we talking tons of apartment complexes? Are we talking fourplexes? Are we talking duplexes? Because duplexes are great. Duplexes can be built in a way that they feel like single-family residential homes, whereas apartment complexes, not so much. For anyone who lives here in Santa Clara County, you know that over the last few years, I say few years, it's probably been a lot longer than that, but we had a whole bunch of apartment complexes get built all along the southern edge of the 85 freeway as it approaches the 101. And these things are the worst. They're like 8 to 10 stories tall, and it is just sardines. It is people packed in like sardines in these places. And in my head, from trying to remember my days of living in an apartment, it is absolutely the kind of place I'd want to be out of as soon as possible. If I could get a single family residential or a duplex or something else without that crush of humanity all around me, I would absolutely jump on it. Even if I had to budget an extra couple of $100 a month for rent, absolutely something I would do. I thought this was interesting, so I thought I'd bring it up. Something we see as a very dominant thing is an increase in multifamily. I thought I'd give you the rundown numbers, though. Overall housing starts picked up slightly in April. Both single-family and multifamily starts ticking higher than the previous month. Of course it did. We're heading out of winter. The fact that the starts increases, that tells me nothing. What I want to know is, what is it compared to the year before? Because what that reflects is just a seasonal influence. If you're going to see a change that's going to increase every single year, my guess is the March-April change is always going to be the same. And historically, that ends up being true. They do end up telling you the year-over-year change, but they make sure to bury it a little further down because that's not good news. So there you go. All right. Sorry, that's one of my pet peeves with these numbers. Single-family home starts rose to 846,000 units, 1.6% above March's level, though down 28.1% year over year. So basically a 30% decline in single-family starts from the same time last year. Multifamily starts increased 5.2% compared to March's dip, reaching 542,000. Multifamily starts lagged last year levels by 11%. So in both cases, it's lower, but multifamily didn't lag as much as single-family. Housing starts picked up the most in the West, increasing 34.6%. Obviously, that's us, for month over month, led by a 59.5% increase in single-family units compared to March. Housing starts in the Northeast fell 23.4% compared to March, but we're only 2.2%. I'm about to sneeze, so hold on a second here. Apologies before it comes. Excuse me. Oh, my. Sorry about that. All right. So that was really the payoff here. The other thing was the number of multifamily units under construction has climbed each month, except for in March 2023, when it stayed flat for more than 2 years as high levels of multifamily activity during the pandemic filters through the construction pipeline. So that was sort of a nice little tidbit, but it's not the kind of numbers that we would see that would bring more onto the market. But given where we are, I'm not real sure that that's something to be worried about right now. Buyers just don't seem to be willing to come out. Next, April 2023 rental report. Rent growth is at the slowest rate since the start of the pandemic. Make sure to pay attention to how that's phrased. Rent growth. Growth is still happening. It just isn't happening as rapidly as it has over past months. And we're just going to hit the bullet points here on this one. April 2023 marks the 15th month of slowing rent growth and 9th month in a row with a single-digit rate of increase for 0 to 2 bedroom properties. And boy, does that matter. One thing we have seen locally is a dramatic increase in costs of 0 bedrooms, so studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. As folks have tried to focus on lower cost housing, the amount of increase in that market share has been huge here in Santa Clara County, with lower increases in 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms, which is kind of interesting to look at. And I've got a chart we can actually look at later if you so want to. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I don't think I'm missing anyone's comments here. I've seen a couple of folks come in through a couple of different things, even on Twitch, a couple of folks coming through. The median, so the single digit rate increase for 0 to 2 bedroom properties, 0.3% year over year, the lowest rate since the onset of the pandemic. Median asking price, and that's not what we're seeing here locally in Santa Clara County, by the way. That is far below what we're seeing. The median asking rent in the 50 largest metros increased to $1,734, up by $4 from last month and down by $43. Rent has been growing faster in smaller units, which is what we're seeing here. Rent by size, studio 1,444, up 2.1 year over year. One bed up 1,618, up 1.2. Two bed up 0.9%. Rents in the Midwest continue to increase faster, while rents in the West down 2.6 year over year in Sunbelt market. Again, not seeing that. We're seeing a slowdown in the rate of increase, but we're still seeing rental increases. And we can look, a great place to see that is to go to some place like Trulia. And I'm in Trulia probably every month looking at rental rates for 3-bed, 2-bath, since that's sort of the bread and butter number. And also specifically for my house, it's always sort of been at the back of my mind that I might move into a different home and rent this one out. And so my home's a larger home. It's a 5-bedroom, 3-bath. So it tends to be more unique because there aren't a lot of those out for rent. And the rent that they would get the last time I looked is absolutely insane. So, all right, let's go ahead. Next, existing home sales fall in April as buyers struggle to find homes. This one really, I just wanted to look at the chart where we just sort of see an uptick last month and then a drop in April of 3.4% month over month and 23.2% year over year. And again, reflected here, right? So what's interesting is this is a national number, and our local number exceeded what happened nationally, but it's interesting that this is a national trend. It's been a broad decline in home sales. Freddie Mac mortgage rates tick up as markets await clearer economic picture. Again, this is one I just wanted to show you for the chart. We're up close to 7% right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at these numbers. If we do a purchase, a 30-year fixed rate, and I always like to do it for our area, right? So let's go ahead and do Morgan Hill. Let's assume an average priced home of, I don't know, what, 1.1, 1.2 million bucks. And that's actually not horrible, right? 5.795, but with, I take that back, with $19,500 in fees. So you're basically buying that lower rate, right? This would only make sense for someone who plans to stay in the house forever. And I got to say, I don't think I would ever pay that. That is insane. But this is also insane. $9,100 in fees for 6.835%. Where you end up paying $6,745, which is just freaking crazy. So there's that. Let's see, where were we? Freddie is where we were. All right, next, weekly housing trends view data week ending May 13th. Let's see, key findings. The median listing price grew by 1.1% over the last year, and that's median. So remember the difference between median and average. Median means this is a number, and half of the stuff that happened was above it, and half of the stuff that happened was below it. The average is just the average. You take the sum of all of the things and divide it by the number of things, and that gives you the average. It's always interesting to see the relationship between median and average, and I'm always confused why they don't give average with median. If the average is below the median, you know that things were focused at a lower price point. If it's above the median, you know things were focused at a higher price point, or at least it gives you some indications to look that direction. So not sure why they don't include that stuff. Resumed its decline, registering a 1.1% year over year after 3 straight weeks of consistent 2.4% growth. Despite this trend, home sellers continue to have high expectations of the housing market, and we already talked about that. Expectations here absolutely are higher. So a lot of people are still not calibrated to the realities of our local market. New listings, a measure of sell, and this is the national numbers, right? So we're covering this to compare and contrast with what we just talked about relating to our local Santa Clara County numbers. New listings, a measure of sellers putting homes up for sale, were down again this week by 25% from 1 year ago. New listings, we're down 32.5% from the same time last year. So we are beating in a bad way the national number. Active inventory was up at a slower pace, with for sale homes up just 23% from a year ago. We have a downturn. We have a 20% decline, while nationally it's a 23% increase, which is interesting. I mean, absolutely nuts. Homes spent 15 extra days on the market compared to the same time last year. Well, if we look at days on market, we can see that we're at 9 days more, 10 days last year, 19 days this year in Santa Clara County overall. Freedom Fest. Now, this is another local thing. This is for those of you in Morgan Hill or anywhere in the South Valley, right? If I love our 4th of July parade in Morgan Hill. It is, I believe, it is the state's 4th of July parade. It is always a great experience. When my kids were younger and would let me drag them to stuff like this, we went every single time. Parking is a huge pain in the butt. So now when I go, I ride my motorcycle and find convenient parking right up there. But I love it. It's a great event. And what's really weird is the organizers of this for a while were like, well, we need more. I'm not sure why we need an enhanced security thing. I guess just in general, people are more worried about that. But if you've never been, just like if you've never been to a mushroom Mardi Gras, or if you've never been to the garlic festival, right? You always have to go once. Granted, you may never need to have garlic ice cream again in your life after you've had it that first time, but it's definitely a bucket list thing. Just check it off your list, because it's a great time. And Freedom Fest has always been a good time. Let's see. While it is ultimately up to the organizers of events like Freedom Fest, Taste of Morgan Hill, and others to determine whether to host festivities under the new normal environment of heightened security risks and increased costs, they can expect their plans to be more closely scrutinized by city officials, police, and public safety authorities well into the future. That applies to the 2023 Freedom Fest, the annual celebration of Independence Day that organizers are determined to host as usual on July 3rd and 4th, according to Freedom Fest President Matthew Stein. Quote, Morgan Hill Freedom Fest has always taken place since 1876. This year it will look identical or almost identical to last year. And this is a great, typically I know in Halloween particularly, if you've never done downtown Morgan Hill for Halloween, man, I hope they don't cancel that. That is a good time. All the companies along Main Street on Monterey, well, not on Main Street, Monterey Road, it is the main street in downtown. That gets closed off, usually the same closing points as Freedom Fest. Folks come out in their costumes. There's trick-or-treating. There's usually little things to do. Just a good time. Again, something I've taken my kids to most years it's been going on. It's just a cool thing to take part in. And if you get a chance to go, I would suggest it. All right, next. These are the top 20 up-and-coming real estate markets this spring. Again, this comes to us from Bigger Pockets. And the thing I kind of wanted to point out is none of these are even vaguely close to California. They're not in California. They're not near California. They are nowhere near California. I'm not even sure which one of these locations is the closest. Is it Ohio? The Dakotas, maybe? I don't even know. Kansas? These are all super far away. Some of these ring a bell as places I've talked about. But another thing I wanted to drop in your brain, if you're someone who's considering investing, is look at the median listing prices here. $144,000 in Springfield, $172 in Springfield, Ohio versus Illinois, $263 in Iowa, Waterloo, Cedar Falls. And alternatively, you don't need to start here. You can start in something like Realtor.com or Trulia or Zillow and just tell yourself, okay, I have X amount of dollars that I want to invest in something, and I want to do it in real estate, and just use that as your amount of a down payment. And I always suggest keeping a certain amount of cash held back for things you may have to do before you can start marketing it. But then consider jumping in and doing it. You may also want to make sure that you're calculating in a potential 10% property management fee if you don't want to do hands-on management yourself. But even when I was a young guy, and fresh out of college or in college, when I was renting a home, our landlord lived in Boston. So once every 4 months, he might be out and about on the West Coast, but he managed everything himself. And I guess he had 6 or 7 properties at the time. This is the late 80s, early 90s. So it's absolutely something you can do. something we could probably have a conversation about. If you really want to try to jump into this, feel free to contact me directly via the website at soldbyrobert.com, where we can talk about some safe and sane ways to start your real estate investing. I had Snapforce next here. We could do a real quick. I've got it set on Morgan Hill, but let's make me a truth teller here. Let's go ahead and do any price. Let's say that you had you didn't want to spend more than $200,000, right? But you want an investment property. Any property type. Let's say you want to go with single family. You don't want to do condos and townhomes or co-ops because odds are those have an HOA and you're not a fan of HOAs. There. So nothing there, right? We'll do search when moving. We're still looking at California, nothing. But here we go. Here's something in California, 200,000. And it looks, and it's pending. So let's not look at pending. I don't want to see contingent or pending. And there we go. So that what I'm saying is no matter where you are, let's say you are someone who doesn't want to do something super far away, you've got options. And I see options here as we get closer to some very beautiful mountain locations that might make more sense as a Airbnb, right? So just something to think about. These options are always there. And if we want to look, let's say we want to go ahead and do the Dallas thing, right? We just talked about Dallas a few minutes ago. Let's just go ahead and enter Dallas here because that'll be easier. But this is just stuff you can do right from your desktop, right from your computer. You don't have to talk to a real estate agent. You can just get, here we are in Dallas. Anything under 200,000 that's a single family residential home. And then this is what I was talking about. See Dallas, right? Which is also Fort Worth, Arlington, Irving. You're going to see great numbers for Irving. You're going to see good numbers for Garland. Plano is one that was on a list I was looking at not long ago. I'm kind of fond of Fort Worth. I tend to lean into properties that are near a body of water. Maybe that's a California weird genetic defect I have, but I like the idea of potentially being able to get a place that would give people access to water as a short-term rental. But tons of opportunities here, all at a price range that I think is relatively doable. I mean, obviously, if you have a $200,000 property and you have to come up with 20%, you're talking $40,000, right? If not, maybe here's one for $60,000. That looks like it might be a mobile home on land. I'm not a huge fan of the mobile home. Or maybe not. Yikes. And this is just one of those scenarios where you need to be more focused on what something can be versus what something is. But again, to my point before, you'd want to come into that with a ton of cash in your pocket because that would require a ton of stuff. Other things to keep in mind and things they no longer let you do. Some of these sites were my favorites and some switched places because they would let you superimpose crime statistic heat maps on these. So what you need to do is when let's say you've decided, you know what, I'm going to take Robert's suggestion and I'm going to start looking for an investment opportunity. I'm going to be guided by some places maybe that are being suggested, like say by BiggerPockets. So I'm going to look in the greater Dallas area, and I'm also going to look in the Tampa area. I like Tampa. I've been to Tampa. I spent almost not quite a year in Tampa, and I like it. I think it's a great town. So absolutely something you could do. In fact, let's take a look at that. And you decide which one you like. Or let's say you, because you know something about a location, feel like you know that area is going to improve. Maybe that's what you focus. So again, under $200,000. And it doesn't have to be in Tampa. You can be in sort of the greater Tampa area. Where's the Courtney Campbell Causeway? It's one of these guys. Is this the Courtney Campbell? Sorry, I'm taking a walk down memory lane here. Howard Franklin Bridge. Is this the Courtney? Yeah, there he is. The Courtney Campbell Causeway. There's like a hotel, one of those live-in hotel. I bet it's right here. One of those hotels that has like a kitchen and stuff in it. I feel like it was this, or maybe it was this. It's not going to tell me. But anyway, I was there for 6 months. That's a long story for another time. All right. But anyway, here you go, right? So all things that you could potentially get into. And I think I would absolutely consider Clearwater. I used to go to the beaches in Clearwater all the time when I was there. But I think these are all places where you could potentially find yourself a reasonably good deal on something that would be positive cash flow. And again, you can then start figuring out what things rent for. And you don't have to leave the site that you're on. You could potentially do it on realtor.com. But what I would do is use something like Trulia or Zillow, Trulia and Zillow are owned by the same company. So whichever one you get to, you're going to get the same data. The data that it pulls from on the back end is the same. And figure out what things rent for. It's a great live tool to get that kind of stuff done. Okay. Let me go ahead and do this. This is a great little tool that I've started subscribing to get good data. And this is here's a price inventory map. And this is a way to compare the whole country all the way down to our county. But you can see that this is average price reduction by county, June versus April. And this gives us for the whole state. And you can see that in Santa Clara County, peak to current in terms of price reduction is an increase of 6.19%. Active listings 828. This is 30.15. Plumas County is down 14.29. I'm wondering about this number. You can see that we've had February, January, December that were months where prices were being reduced. Overall, we've had dropping price reductions over the last couple of months. That's probably what's reflected here. If we look at price and inventory numbers, if anybody's got a request, if there's data you want to see, I'm happy to do that for you. And again, this is the one thing I like about this is it gives me national numbers. So if I want to look at what's going on in Dallas, I can see what the comparison is to other markets. Here in our local market, we've got average price reduction by county. So that's something weird. 92.3% peak to current. So the peak to where it is now, Santa Clara County from the peak to current is actually up 6.69 in price reductions by county. What else? Top 50 largest price drops. Interesting. Wow. Okay. So that's an interesting one that I hadn't actually looked at before the show. I looked at an awful lot of these before the show to see what you guys might be interested in. But this is a great way to sort of at the 100,000 foot view, get an idea of where you're seeing the biggest price drops, which could reflect a great opportunity for an investor. But if we look here, we can see 8.62 price reductions over in Modesto County, 7.15. And there are some great duplexes in Modesto. I helped someone buy a duplex in Modesto last year, and she's loving it. She's living in one and renting out the other, and she's doing great. Today, could we have gotten that place cheaper? Yeah, probably. I don't think there's any question about that. But she's very much positive cash flow. Almost her entire mortgage is covered by the rent she's paying, and she put 25% down, I believe. But look at this, Southern California. What is that? That's going to be Phoenix. That's Las Vegas. Look at that. Look at those price decreases. This is going to be Reno. And I like Reno. I think Reno is a market that's absolutely close enough to those of us who live in Santa Clara County to potentially do stuff there. But just south of Reno is some interesting stuff going on with Tesla and with Amazon. There's a Tesla factory, either factory or some sort of center being built south of Reno. Denver is another one. Austin is seeing some interesting drops, which is one reason why Austin hasn't been on my short list for a while, but some of the surrounding Austin areas continue to be. And look at Dallas and Fort Worth, right? I was just looking at Fort Worth, 6.81% price drops. What else? Wow, look at that. And this Cape Coral, that shouldn't surprise anyone with the recent hurricane. And I think that's an opportunity. That almost makes me want to take a trip to Cape Coral. Where else? Look at this. Syracuse, New York. New York. That's a big jump or a big drop. That's New Jersey. Hold on. Only a 2.84% drop. I had read an article about New York recently that kind of led me the opposite way. All right. So that's it today, folks. I don't have any questions from anyone in the chat. Next month, we should have some interesting stuff relating to how the chat works. It should be a little bit more efficient. The tool I use to stream to multiple outlets, we're going to kind of consolidate. We're probably going to get rid of Twitch, but now the Restream service that I use will really integrate into Facebook. So all of the chat should be muxed into one. So it should make it easier for me to interact with everybody. All right, folks, that is about it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly at my website, soldbyrobert.com. If you want to take advantage of some of my amazing tools for homeowners, I don't even call them home seller tools anymore. They are, if you own a home, regardless of whether you want to sell it or not, if you plan on never selling, this new tool I have, I think, is critical for everyone. It is the kind of stuff I suggest to all of my home buyers that they do at least once a year, sit down and calculate a lot of the things that this does for you automatically, but this will give you that update every month. So it's a super valuable tool. I'm happy to set it up for you. You can find it directly by going to soldbyrobert.com and clicking on the Get an Instant Value thing. It's right there on the front page, left side. Enter your address, and it'll give you that estimate of your home's value, but it'll also give you all the other information that we've talked about. It's absolutely mind-blowing, so check that out. All right, folks, thanks for spending your valuable Saturday morning with me. I look forward to seeing you again next month for another edition of Coffee and Real Estate.